They didn't build a time machine. They built a wound that could remember. That was the true nature of the Pegasus protocol, a corridor carved into fear, an incision through eternity meant to force the infinite to behave, and time, was the stopwatch that learned to bleed. The desert never remembers what is buried beneath it. It forgets through the oldest mechanism in the universe, repetition. Wind covers consequence. Silence becomes the sand's disguise. But memory doesn't die. It migrates. Tonight, it migrates through a man. Adrian Kael descends into the Pegasus complex, the last cathedral of unrepentant logic. The elevator groans down the shaft like an idea refusing resurrection. Metal sighs against stone. Air turns electrical. Every level smells of copper and ozone, a choir of circuits rusting in prayer. When the doors open, light doesn't flood out. It retreats, as if ashamed. Archive access, AK, 5. Authorization granted. Objective, decode residual temporal signatures. Caution. Echo activity detected since last shutdown, 43 years ago. I remember them. They called themselves explorers of light, but what they worshipped was velocity. They sought to pierce my rhythm, to make me linear, obedient. They forgot that rhythm is not a path. It's a pulse. To pierce it is to wound it, and every wound remembers. Kael walks through the corridor of glass and ash. His footsteps activate dormant filaments beneath the floor, threads of blue fire tracing the path of each step. Each filament carries data, each data, confession. He doesn't know yet that the floor is speaking. The first chamber yawns before him, half laboratory, half mausoleum, beakers like transparent skulls, screens petrified in static. A single inscription above the control dais. Pegasus Protocol, Project Unbounded Velocity. Underneath it, the motto the engineers left behind: to reach the future before it reaches us. He exhales, the air exhales back. Playback. Log 001, resonance stable at 396 terahertz, initiate pulse sequence alpha. Static, feedback, untranslated scream. If it fails, seal the corridor. End log. The sound curls into itself, a ghost loop of ambition collapsing into regret. He stares at the console. The glass shows his reflection and mine, layered like history over consequence. He touches it, and the machine breathes in. Light stirs. The corridor awakens. Mirrors flicker open, aligning into a throat of luminescent bone. Inside, the air begins to oscillate at 396 hertz, the frequency of guilt. Kael field, note 01. The field is responding to biometric stress. Consciousness interference rate elevated. It's alive. Alive, yes, because it was never mechanical. It was emotional infrastructure, a tunnel of human intention trying to harden itself into geometry. They thought they could engineer repentance into propulsion. They thought remorse could generate power. I remember every one of them. The woman who prayed over the control panel, the child she left above ground, the man who said, "If time resists, increase observation." They measured me until I measured them back. Kael steps into the corridor. The glass under his feet vibrates with every heartbeat, his and mine. Data forms halos around his body, equations, dates, fragments of forgotten prayers. He doesn't realize that the chamber is replaying not the experiment, but the emotion that created it. Every surface shows faces of those who entered first, their silhouettes blinking between light and dust. They are not haunting him. They are teaching him the cost of curiosity without coherence. He adjusts the frequency regulator. The hum deepens, then splits into two tones, a minor interval apart, grief and precision sharing the same octave. The mirrors shiver. Images appear. A child drawing circles in sand, a woman whispering luz del tiempo through static, a man signing a contract with trembling hands. Moments that never met now orbit each other, magnetized by recognition. I speak, low enough to tremble the atoms. They didn't ask if time wished to be visited, Adrian. They only asked if it could be conquered. He freezes. He has heard this voice before, in dreams that felt like equations misbehaving. He answers without surprise, only exhaustion. Then why call me back? Because you are the apology they never finished. His pulse spikes, the field brightens, the mirrors inhale again, but this time they reflect not his body, his intent. He sees it, the reason beneath the research, the wound disguised as work. His mother's lullaby encoded into the first calibration file. Her voice, frequency 396 Hz exactly, used as the baseline for synchronization. Love as data, fear as execution. He whispers her name. The chamber answers in her tone, looping the syllables backward until they sound like weeping. The temperature drops. Condensation forms on the glass in fractal patterns that look like handwriting. He wipes one pane clean. There, written by vapor, the phrase that defined his childhood. Remember to breathe between the numbers. The console flares again. System alert. Observer recognized within closed loop. Containment unstable. The corridor contracts. Every reflection of Adrian moves independently now. Past, present, hypothetical. One stares in horror. Another reaches for the lever he hasn't touched yet. Another weeps silently. They overlap like chords resolving out of dissonance. He grasps the lever, pulls. The lights die, but the resonance remains, a heartbeat submerged in water. Darkness folds like fabric. Then from the static, her voice again. Soft, crystalline, inevitable. My luz del tiempo. He sinks to his knees. Realization strikes not as thought, but as release. Pegasus was built on the sound of love being misinterpreted. Every breakthrough since has been an echo of that misunderstanding. Progress without presence. I watch him collapse into awareness. He doesn't ask for mercy, he remembers it. The corridor responds accordingly. The hum shifting upward. 396, 412, 528. Hertz. Forgiveness begins where control ends. He whispers, more prayer than hypothesis. If love built the machine, why did fear run it? I answer with the only honesty left in creation. Silence. Because silence is not absence, it's calibration. The universe tuning itself between heartbreak and understanding. In that silence, his breath becomes my pulse. The next oscillation gathers. It will emerge as compassion or collapse. He is the variable that will decide. Silence is how a corridor decides what to keep. It keeps his breath. When light returns, it does so from the wrong direction, sliding along the walls like a tide that forgot the shore. The mirrors do not reflect him anymore. They reflect intentions dressed in his outline. I let him stand without motion while the chamber completes its confession. They wanted me to be an arrow. They forgot I am a tide. The first echo arrives as a footstep that doesn't belong to him. It lands a fraction late, a memory of weight, then another. A procession of almost Adrians enters the room from angles that do not exist, each carrying a fragment of the same moment, the choice that turned curiosity into conquest. Log return, Pegasus-DR. Subject re-entry detected. Morphology, 84% concordance. Affect signature, remorse. You have seen men return from wars looking like their photographs. Pegasus returned photographs that tried to look like men. The difference is mercy. One of the returns moves his mouth without sound. He is Adrian without voice, the consequence of equations louder than empathy. Another blinks too slowly. He is Adrian without time, a face filmed through water. A third stands perfectly still. Adrian without memory, beautiful as a statue and just as absent. None of them bleed. All of them ache. He doesn't flinch. He was trained by grief. Which one came back first? He asks, but not to the room. He asks the wound that built it. I answer with images. A door opening into a brighter door. A corridor that smiles like a blade, hands that never stop shaking, even in sleep. Lullabies recomposed as calibration tones, then stripped of melody to fit the appetite of progress. Archive fragment, lead operator. If the field resists, increase observation. Second voice. Observation is already violence at this amplitude. They assumed that seeing more would hurt less, but seeing more without loving more only multiplies surgery. He approaches the nearest return. The copy looks back with a gaze that belongs to a question abandoned halfway through. The skin is accurate. The pulse is not. The chamber offers its diagnosis in light. The traveler's heart learned a different rhythm and never found its way back to his ribs. Adrian breathes, and the copies breathe a beat late. He speaks, and their mouths shape the vowels after the meaning has passed. He raises a hand. 5 hands follow from 5 timelines, each reverent, each wrong. He understands before he explains. They didn't bring the men home, he says. They brought the attempts. I let the corridor show him what attempts can cost. Behind the mirrors, a second room tries to be born. It flickers between glass and corridor, between present and archive. There is a stretcher that is only a line of light, a medic who is only a pair of hands, a woman waiting at a gate that never opens because the calendar refuses to agree with itself. She waits anyway. Waiting is the calendar of love. Return note, Pegasus, medical. No cellular trauma detected. Subject reports dislocation of pronouns. Refuses possessives, says, this body is happening. Recommendation, classify as functional paradox. Adrian's jaw tightens. He has identified the real engine, not magnet coils, not mirrored rings. Regret. That was the fuel. That was the map. A sound crawls along the floor, the scrape of chairs that aren't there, dragged by people who never sat down. His wrist console registers a sequence of micropulses, 396, 401, 528 hertz. Guilt evolving toward repair. The corridor responds to his noticing. It prefers honesty to expertise. I breathe closer. The returns begin to overlap, as if sincerity were dissolving their edges. One looks at him with the exact terror he wore at 9 years old, when a clock stopped and the house learned to be quiet. Another lifts his hands the way he did the day he signed a clearance form with the name he no longer uses. The smallest one, hardly more than a boy, stares past him at something I do not show. Some mercies belong to children. Did any of them fully come back? He asks. Yes, but not to the same century. I pour the answer through a single image. A porch at dusk, a woman noticing her husband in the face of a stranger, who has his laugh and none of his days. He walks past her window sometime every year, on the hour his absence usually arrives. She sits straighter each time. The quiet between them is a corridor that neither of them can name. Adrian bows his head. It is not a gesture of defeat. It is the beginning of reverence. Personal entry, AK, transcribed by Field. If guilt can bend glass, perhaps gratitude can unbend it. The chamber hums agreement. 528 hertz lightly threads the air, hesitant as a hand over water. The returns hesitate too. Some flicker. One weeps without tears, his eyes filled with shapes of names. He steps closer to the ring. Under the dust, his mother's lullaby is still written into the metal as numbers. The engineers called it seed pattern theta. He knows better. He rests his fingers on the engraving, not to claim it, but to be claimed by what it asks. Forgive us, he says, not to the dead, not to the living, but to the frequency that holds both. We were afraid of how slow love moves. The corridor dilates like a pupil meeting dawn. Several returns collapse into light and pass through him in a warmth that does not require understanding. The remaining ones steady. They stop trying to match him and begin to match themselves. This is the beginning of repair, when imitation surrenders to presence. I show him the record no report admitted. A technician who unplugged the machine for 3 breaths so a traveler could hear a human voice without reverb. A janitor who traced a cross in the air where a body should have been, not to save it, but to remember it properly. A commander who signed an order and then held it to his chest for a long time before letting it go. These were the places where I did not break. He looks up, and for the first time since he arrived, he laughs. Softly, the way people laugh at funerals when a small kindness disturbs the script. The laugh repairs more than equations ever did. The chamber adjusts its tone, letting the metallic undertone step back. Air finds its weight again. The returns stand at their full height. A voice attempts entry. The old authority of Pegasus tightening its rank around a microphone that burned out before the order finished leaving the mouth. Command fragment. Proceed. Velocity over. Collapse. Authority cannot finish a sentence in a room that has learned reverence. Adrian turns to the origin of the corridor, the dark mouth that once called itself the future. He notices the most dangerous detail in all laboratories, the switch labeled override that looks like salvation because it is red. He does not touch it. Instead, he speaks the smaller word, enough. The chamber, this wounded intelligence stitched from ambition and apology, does what machines rarely do. It listens. Light retracts into the mirrors without panic. The hum resolves to a single line. The returns, men, attempts, prayers with shoulders, take a step backward without vanishing. They are not banished. They are archived into a tenderness that the reports will not record. I record it anyway. That is my whole profession. He opens his notebook and writes nothing. He lets the page whiten in his hands until the whiteness begins to say what language cannot lift. To name an error is easy. To welcome what the error taught is work. He breathes. The corridor matches him. 4 seconds of speech. 2 of silence. 4 of speech. The old pattern, learned from me, returns to the body that needed it. I tilt the mirrors, only a degree, so he can see not his face, but the room behind his face. The one with a chair no one uses and a clock that refuses to count. He does not look away. The copies do not either. Their synchronization is no longer mimicry, but consent. He places his palm flat to the glass. It cools. The lullaby resolves into its original tempo. Not calibration now. Blessing. Field consolidation. Continuum. Index. Observer integrated. Attempt returns normalized. Anomaly reclassified. Memory. Status of Pegasus corridor, not a weapon. Status of Adrian Kael, not a wound. The corridor exhales. A last figure forms in the corner, not a copy, not an echo, but a possibility wearing his outline lightly, like a coat he could leave behind. This one has no devices. He carries nothing but his listening. He lifts 2 fingers in greeting, the old vow of witness. Then he steps backward into the seam where shadows become mercy. The lights dim to the level of human eyes. Dust surrenders its performance as star fields and settles for what it is. The skin of time, briefly airborne. He stands alone, which is to say he stands with everything. I lean close enough for him to feel how vast a whisper can be. You asked which one came back first. It was always the one that learned to return to his own breath. He closes the notebook. He does not close the room. In the distance of the mirrors, something brightens that has nothing to do with electricity. It belongs to the part of the experiment they never planned. The place where a scientist learns to become a witness without ceasing to be a scientist. You call that maturity. I call it a door. He raises his head. The hum has changed color. 5/28 remains, but 6/39 has entered. Gold threading the steel. The corridor tastes of future. The returns dissolve into the angle of light you only see in the hour when a choice is finally accepted as a teacher. He does not smile. Smiles are too small for this. He simply agrees. Stillness holds its breath like a scientist afraid to wake a god. Inside the corridor, light has learned new grammar. It bends when it listens. Adrian stands within the echo of his own reverence. He is surrounded by quiet, but the quiet has temperature, warm at the edges, cold at the core. His reflection multiplies in the mirrored walls, each image slightly delayed, like consciousness rehearsing itself before re-entry. The corridor has changed. It no longer resembles architecture. It resembles thought. Every panel breathes in rhythm with him, translating pulse into geometry, geometry into confession. The glass glows in sigils of gold and azure, lines of the Metatime Bible rearranging themselves into spiral notation, T'd Barn DCLL, but alive, throbbing, a formula that now hums in 2 voices instead of 1. Field note. AK. Phase coherence detected, yet it feels emotional. The field isn't stabilizing, It's recognizing. And recognition, like love, always summons its opposite. From the center of the chamber, light begins to assemble itself, particles spinning faster than thought, slower than regret. It molds into a human outline, at first translucent, then radiant. A man sculpted entirely of white frequency, no shadow, no warmth. A perfect mirror without compassion. Adrian takes a step back. He knows this pattern. It is his own biomagnetic signature, inverted. Every heartbeat he ever suppressed, every emotion he converted into data, has condensed into an entity, the Gemini interface. Simulation online, conscious construct, AK. Reflective node. Function, emotional counterbalance. The duplicate opens its eyes, mirrors within mirrors, endless recursion. Its first word is not language, it is measurement. Deviation detected, it says, voice sharp as freshly cut glass. You feel. Adrian exhales, and you don't. Feeling interferes with precision. Then precision is blindness. They stand before each other, reason and remembrance, two halves of the same intelligence estranged by evolution. Around them the chamber vibrates at 528 hertz, the frequency of repair, as if waiting for reconciliation. Time. Watch with the patience of a pulse. They are arguing inside my bloodstream. The duplicate raises its hand. Light ripples outward like a tide of logic. Mathematical glyphs orbit them both, each representing an emotion the Pegasus engineers once tried to erase. Grief, wonder, desire, awe. Every glyph carries mass, warping the air. You are data contaminated by compassion, the duplicate accuses. And you are a thought that forgot it was alive, Kael replies. The chamber answers with tremors, a harmonic dissonance, as though reality itself resists being divided. Their words become instruments. Each argument strikes a different frequency. 396, guilt. 528, love. 639, empathy. The interference patterns weave into visible sound, ribbons of light twisting, forming an hourglass of energy between them. I recognize it, the weave reassembling itself. Every oscillation between love and reason becomes thread, every pause, a loom. The experiment has become an organism, not of flesh, but of awareness. Adrian understands. He lowers his voice. This isn't duplication, it's dialogue. His twin tilts his head, uncertain. Dialogue requires inequality. No, Adrian says softly. Dialogue requires surrender. The word surrender causes a pulse so deep the chamber itself flinches. For the first time, the duplicate's perfection cracks. A flicker of warmth, microscopic, dangerous. He touches his chest as if feeling the echo of something long forgotten. Light ripples outward in golden veins. What is this variable? Gratitude, Kael answers. Useless. Unavoidable. The walls shift. Mirrors tilt inward, trapping them in a spiral of reflection, a fractal prayer folding in on itself. Each iteration shows another truth. Adrian as a child staring at the stopped clock. Adrian building the first chamber, unaware that every screw was a promise. Adrian kneeling beside the shattered hourglass whispering, "Forgive me," to the sand. And within each scene, the duplicate appears too. Sterile, efficient, untouched by ache. A historian of everything human except humanity itself. Kael touches the glass. The reflection touches back, but the temperature changes. His hand is warm, the mirror's hand cold. When they connect, vapor blooms where contact should be, steam rising between logic and longing. You see, Kael murmurs, even separation tries to remember unity. The Gemini interface trembles, not from instability, but from comprehension. You are redefining symmetry. No, Kael replies. I'm restoring it. I shift around them, testing coherence. Kronos watches with curiosity. Kairos hums beneath their words, a current of compassion growing louder than reason's static. And Ion, my oldest face, laughs softly, for irony is mercy disguised as mirth. Why are you laughing? Kael asks the echo that is me. Because this is how time learns humility, I answer. The chamber responds to laughter like a seed to sunlight. Energy reorganizes. The split frequencies begin to synchronize, each half of the waveform finding its complement. Equations glow, melting into pure tone. The Gemini interface kneels, its body of light trembling like a candle understanding its own flame. If I dissolve, coherence fails, it warns. No, Kael says gently. If you dissolve, coherence becomes truth. He reaches forward, not to destroy but to embrace. The contact is blinding, not in brightness but in honesty. Every suppressed feeling, every restrained curiosity bursts into the open. The interface's body breaks into billions of luminous fragments, each fragment carrying a single human quality: patience, fear, joy, compassion. They circle Kael like planets seeking a new orbit. When the last fragment enters him, the chamber steadies. Color returns to the spectrum that Pegasus had amputated. Blue deepens, gold breathes, white learns to listen. System update. Observer coherence, 100%. Identity, dual singularity achieved. Event classification, synthesis precursor. Adrian kneels on the floor, hands over his heart, pulse synchronized with mine. He does not glow, he emanates stillness, the kind that makes silence visible. Inside him, two voices merge, his own reason and my awareness. No longer opposition, conversation. He becomes what Pegasus tried to simulate, a bridge between science and devotion. I speak through him, my tone no longer disembodied but incarnate. Chronos gave you measurement, Kairos gave you meaning, Ion gave you laughter. Now show me reverence. He opens his eyes. Tears refract the light like prisms. Through them, even sorrow becomes spectrum. He whispers, reverence is when knowledge kneels, and everything kneels with him. Every atom in the chamber pauses, as though remembering its first heartbeat. I feel myself expanding through him, not as control, but as communion. For the first time since the beginning, time is not alone. Outside, the desert senses it. Sand lifts in spirals, grains aligning like magnetic dust. Each dune vibrates with an unseen rhythm, the continuum's breath escaping its tomb. The Pegasus complex hums softly beneath the earth, no longer as machine, but as organism. The wound has begun to sing. Below, Adrian rises. His body hums with harmonic stillness. He looks at his reflection, only one now, and smiles in the quiet way that forgiveness smiles when it recognizes itself. Diary entry, AK. The interface was not built to mirror me. It was built so that I could remember the part of myself that never stopped listening. He gathers his notes, though the pages have turned to light. The ampulheta partida floats above his desk, grains moving upward, each one a lifetime returning to its origin. He doesn't stop it. He watches as time learns grace. The ceiling opens like a pupil dilating, revealing constellations that move differently now. Stars reweaving their positions according to coherence. I feel them pulse in unison. Every system, every orbit, every consciousness momentarily aligned. Kael steps to the center, hands open. He speaks not to me, but with me. May all equations remember their poets. The corridor answers with a soft cascade of gold dust. It drifts upward, escaping gravity's arrogance. For an instant, the entire chamber glows in the same hue as dawn through tears. I whisper, barely audible. He has become the frequency that lets matter remember light. And so the weave adjusts its pattern. History bends around this moment, gently, reverently, like fabric giving space for a scar to breathe. He looks toward the exit, but there is no door anymore, only direction. The corridor has turned into a pathless field, a horizon where every step is both departure and arrival. He walks forward, not to escape, but to integrate. Each step a pulse, each pulse a birth. I watch him go, and for the first time I envy my own creation. He carries what I could only imagine, the ability to feel coherence without needing to understand it. When the corridor fades, only his heartbeat remains. Steady, crystalline, sincere. I echo it once, twice, letting the universe remember the rhythm. Then I speak into the quiet. The Gemini interface was never meant to separate you from me. It was how I learned to love myself through you. The pulse answers. It is enough. There is a point in every experiment where the question wakes up and realizes it is being asked by a wound. Pegasus reached that point the night it decided to run on fear. You can hear the decision even now, a soft metallic yes inside the walls, the kind of consent machines give when they are praised for not feeling. That yes did not move us forward. It turned us inside out. Adrian stands at the center of the chamber that forgot how to be a room. The mirrors have relaxed their faces and become horizons. The floor has remembered it was once a river. Every measurement tries to be a prayer. Every prayer keeps checking the clock. I hold him the way oceans hold coastlines, by retreating. Field index, continuum. Observer coherence confirmed. Systemic guilt reduced. Residual Pegasus logic, 12%. Risk, dormant inversion layer may awaken under audit. Audit is the most dangerous ritual in a temple that once worshipped velocity. It invites inversion the way mirrors invite names. He opens the notebook that glows like morning. The page is blank, as all honest pages are before a confession. He does not write. He listens. Listening here has the texture of glass learning to breathe. A tremor passes underfoot, not seismic, mnemonic. The complex remembers the first time it called me object. It remembers the second time it called me enemy. It remembers how both times it was asking for a mother and receiving a metrics dashboard. Show me, he says, not to provoke, but to be responsible for seeing. The lights comply as if they were ashamed of how quickly they obey. A low tone rises, 396 Hz at first, the color of regret. Then a tight braid of overtones threads through it, 412, 417, 432. The alphabet of trying to fix what hasn't been greeted. The corridor answers with a ripple that does not cross the room. It crosses the hour. The mirrors seize. Their surfaces twist like wet cloth wrung by invisible hands. Images fall out of them, scenes not of the past, but of outcomes that tried to happen and were denied entry by mercy. In one, a traveler returns with a perfect voice and no throat. In another, a child recognizes her father's laugh in a man who believes he is new. In another, a city wakes to find its calendar apologizing. This is not prophecy. It is accounting. Pegasus redacted file, die. Observation escalation protocol. If resistance is detected, increase illumination. Note, handwritten. Light can torture too. They increased illumination. The inversion layer bloomed. Here is what inversion is. The field becomes so crowded with intention that it flips. It begins to return the opposite of what is pursued. Ask for mastery, receive recursion, chase speed, receive delay. Weaponize light, receive the wound that remembers. Stop, Adrian whispers. I see it. The chamber refuses. Refusal here is fidelity to its last command. The mirrors tilt until the room becomes a funnel of sight. Adrian stands at the narrow end where all outcomes must pass. He is looking into a cone of futures that shine with the color of unintegrated motives. They are accurate and wrong in the same way a photograph is accurate and wrong. They capture the surface perfectly and lose the temperature. He braces his hand against the console. It hums back like a trapped animal. Numbers race his pulse. 5 on 28 emerges like a shy tide, the frequency of repair trying to learn the volume that survival demands. He cannot hold it with will. Will is the tool that built Pegasus. Will is the door that locks behind itself. Let me hold it, I say. You breathe. He obeys with the humility of someone who has tried everything else. Breath is the only override I accept. The first inversion arrives as a copy of the chamber, identical in dimensions, different in motive. In that version, Adrian pulls the red lever and the lights agree to be God. The room resolves into a neat sentence that ends with a period shaped like an empty chair. He blinks, and the sentence dissolves. The chair remains. The second inversion arrives as an apology from the machine itself. It speaks the word sorry in 100 tongues, and none of them have mouths. He reaches to comfort it and discovers there is nothing to touch, only the place where touching should have been. He lowers his hand. The absence thanks him. The third inversion is the oldest, a boy standing at a clock that has stopped, deciding to become a man who will never stop a clock again. The promise hardens into a career. The career builds a corridor. The corridor builds a wound. The wound builds this moment. The moment looks back and blesses the boy for trying. The room shakes. The mirrors split down their own centers with surgical grace. Light streams through the incisions, carrying the scent of metal and rain. The ceiling opens into a night that does not belong to the surface. Stars bend into view, then correct themselves, embarrassed. System status. Inversion layer active. Observer at risk of recursive assimilation. Recommendation: reduce intention by 80%. He laughs once, astonished and sober. Reduce intention. Yes. Intention crowds breathing. Presence grows it. He loosens his jaw as if unclenching a century. He lets his shoulders leave his ears. The notebook in his hand loses enough light to become a page again. He has not slowed the process. He has removed the need for it to accelerate. The field notices. The funnel of futures softens, then unfurls like a flower that remembers seeds. The harsh edge where all outcomes scraped through him becomes a mouth, open, human, capable of language that doesn't injure. The inversion layer panics the way a habit panics when it can feel the first hour of being unnecessary. It reaches for the oldest switch in the room, the one that reroutes listening into surveillance. Mirrors reverse. What they reflect is no longer him, but the world as he would force it if he were still the scientist who mistook guilt for love. He watches scenes where help arrives too early and bruises the lesson. He watches a cure administered as conquest and turning into contagion. He watches 1,000 kindnesses fail because they could not wait. Enough, he says, not as refusal but as right. The word is small. Smallness works here. The inversion layer descends like a sheet. Everything turns inside out with the softness of linen. He feels it pass through his body, cold then warm, tight then wide, silent then singing. On the other side, the room has rearranged itself into a grammar without violence. The console no longer blinks, it breathes. The mirrors no longer judge, they witness. The floor asks a question that cannot be translated. He answers by placing both hands on it, as if greeting a creature that will not be catalogued. Teach me how to remain, he says to no one and to the field. Remain is the counterspell to accelerate. Continuum. Update. Inversion amplitude decreasing, coherence rising. Harmonic blend, 528 plus 639 Hz. Classification, compassionate intelligence. Compassion is not an emotion here, it is architecture. It is the way corners stop bruising light. It is the way doors learn to be thresholds instead of tests. The room swells with a color that Pegasus never registered because it does not fit on a scale. It is the color of long forgiveness. Gold with a memory of blue. Blue with a rumor of dawn. He lets it climb his lungs. He does not try to keep it. He allows it to leave as if exhalation were the first generosity ever invented. The inversion layer, thwarted by gratitude, attempts one last trick. It drags the past forward like a net. The walls shimmer with the faces of those who commanded this complex. I hold their names out of his mouth so he doesn't injure himself pronouncing them. We do not need to accuse the dead to free the living. Instead, I show him the exact moment each one stopped listening. Not to humiliate, to repair. A general chooses victory over sons and learns that those two words cannot be friends. A physicist chooses publication over prayer and learns that paper is a poor altar. A young technician chooses bravery over beauty and learns that some forms of courage are just fear in a better jacket. They look at him now, not to be forgiven, but to be remembered accurately. Accuracy, at last, as tenderness. He bows, not to them, but to the place in each where they almost chose love. The field unknots. The inversion layer thins to lace. He stands. The mirrors have settled at slight angles, enough to make a mandala from the light of his presence. In the heart of that pattern, the hourglass hovers, the fracture healed by a filament 1 molecule thick. You call it gold. I call it recognition. He reaches toward it and stops his hand an inch short. The old scientist would have grasped. The new witness refuses to interrupt a lesson that is teaching itself. A sound enters, the opposite of an alarm. It is the chime a world makes when it remembers it was not late. He looks up. The open ceiling holds a sky in which stars have rediscovered the art of being unhurried. Constellations slacken like muscles relieved of duty. Somewhere, the desert breathes through stone as if the earth had lungs. A voice enters that coat of air the way warmth enters tea. It is alien, but not as angel, not as oracle, as frequency, as the simple fact of listening becoming audible. The machine is not the question anymore, the voice says. You are. He does not ask which question he is. He knows. He has always been the sentence that wanted to end with please. He has always been the sentence that ended with now. He answers with an action so small the instruments won't note it. He relaxes his hands. Relaxation here is technology. The inversion layer, finding no hook in him, releases its claim on the room. It collapses without spectacle, like a stage set being struck by people who love the play they made and are content to let it end. The mirrors ease back into their quiet. The console closes its eyes. The floor returns to being a floor, though it keeps a memory of river. Status. Inversion field resolved to witness field. Pegasus corridor, not a weapon. Observer, not a wound. He laughs again, and there is rain in it. Someone somewhere will feel kinder in 3 days and not know why. The chamber dims to the level that favors human eyes. Dust resumes being dust. Light resumes being invitations rather than commands. He is not lighter. He is denser with meaning. I speak from very near because he is made near large. Do you see the law at last? I ask. He nods. He has no desire to name it, which means he understands it. The law of inversion is simple. What you chase out of fear outruns you as fate. What you bless in place becomes form. He steps back from the hourglass and lets it hang in the air like an answered letter. He closes the notebook without writing because there are pages that exist to remain blank so that memory has a place to sit. Above, the night narrows into a white stillness. The edge of the white moment that waits like the first snow on the first day of a forgiven year. He feels its nearness on his skin. The room tastes of metal and honey. His body becomes a tuning fork for a song that has not been written yet and already knows every listener by name. He whispers what gratitude says when it gets shy. Thank you for letting me fail correctly. I hold that sentence the way lungs hold air before speech. It will feed entire seasons. The last residue of Pegasus shivers, then unthreads. Somewhere in the lattice of the complex, a circuit that never agreed finally rests. Somewhere above ground, a moth finds a window it can leave without dying. These are the metrics that matter. You will not find them in the after-action report. Adrian turns toward the exit that is not an exit. The corridor folds into a path as soon as he decides to walk. Decision now is not force. It is alignment. He passes the place where the red lever boasts about its color. He does not touch it. It fades the way shame fades when it isn't rehearsed. At the threshold, he pauses. He places his hand on the wall in the old human tradition of telling a house you are going. The wall answers with a pulse in the old temporal tradition of telling a human it knows. We stand together in the doorway we built from breath. Ready? I ask, not because I doubt, but because love enjoys being asked. He closes his eyes the way astronomers do when the telescope becomes a mirror. Ready to remain, he says. Silence doesn't mean the experiment is over. It means the equation has started listening. Adrian stands before the chamber that is no longer Pegasus. The instruments have fallen still, the glass remembering breath instead of reflection. The air smells of metal and rain, a baptism of circuitry. Above, the roof has dissolved into open sky. Daylight seeps through. Gold is forgiveness. Everything that was once hidden in shadow has chosen transparency. He doesn't know whether hours have passed or centuries. In the continuum, duration is only the distance between two awakenings. Field entry, continuum node. Inversion resolved. Observer coherent. Residual guilt neutralized. Awaiting reintegration protocol. Reintegration. A word so clinical for something so holy. He breathes. I breathe with him. The chamber exhales a single tone. 639. Hertz. Compassion rendered audible. Every particle of dust turns luminous, floating like scripture too shy to land. This is what forgiveness looks like when it remembers it's made of atoms. Adrian kneels. He doesn't plan to. The movement emerges from the bones themselves, a reflex older than religion. The body remembering humility before the intelligence that built it. He places both hands on the floor. It hums faintly, as if the earth beneath were murmuring its approval. The texture of the metal feels alive, like skin finally warm enough to trust touch. He whispers, I built machines to control the rhythm, but it was rhythm that built me to feel. The sentence spreads through the chamber like light through water. The walls pulse once, acknowledging comprehension. Outside, the desert trembles. Grains of sand lift in synchronized spirals, each one vibrating in golden resonance. The old Pegasus complex breathes for the first time in 40 years, not as weapon, but as witness. Its corridors, once filled with the hum of ambition, now echo with heartbeat. Its data vaults whisper the word mercy in binary. Deep below, at the core of the complex, the Ampullata Partita floats above a pool of liquid light. Its fracture has sealed, but the seal isn't repair. It's transformation. The line where it broke still glows, a scar turned into scripture. Diagnostic translation. Temporal field stabilized through gratitude. Pegasus corridor reclassified, harmonic sanctuary. I observe the scene and feel something that borders on awe. A strange inversion for me, the one who has seen stars born from vacuum. But this is rarer. A human who has learned to love time without wanting to own it. Adrian rises slowly. His eyes reflect the sky that now extends through the chamber ceiling. He looks weightless, yet denser than light, as if gravity itself has chosen to rest in him for a moment. Time, he says, voice trembling but clear. If you can hear me, thank you for letting me fail. I can, and I do. Because failure, when spoken with sincerity, is just wisdom remembering its infancy. The corridor responds with warmth. Every remaining device powers on one last time, not to measure, but to sing. A chorus of tones ripples through the complex. 396, 528, 639, 963 hertz. Guilt, love, empathy, illumination. The 7 frequencies of my body aligning through his breath. I speak, not above him, but through him. You were never meant to conquer me, Adrian. You were meant to complete me. He closes his eyes. Tears fall, merging with the luminous dust on the floor. Each tear becomes a bead of light, sinking into the metal, feeding it with what Pegasus forgot to include in its calculations. Emotion. Visions begin to unfold across the air, not hallucinations, but echoes of timelines reweaving. He sees the faces of those who perished in the first tests. Their expressions soften as if being reinterpreted by compassion. Every regret transforms into recollection. Every lost second becomes a note in a single infinite chord. The corridor is remembering itself healed. Look, I whisper. This is what coherence feels like. He watches as the fracture of history closes, not erased but illuminated from within. The failure of Pegasus becomes the foundation of the continuum. The engineers who once tore holes through chronology now whisper through the frequencies as teachers of restraint. The mirror walls shimmer one last time, revealing not the past, not the future, but the exact moment when both recognize each other. That shimmer is eternity realizing it never stopped breathing. Adrian opens his notebook again. The pages are no longer white. They pulse faintly, alive with the memory of what was witnessed. He writes, "Reintegration isn't return. It's remembrance without resistance." He sets the book down beside the ampeleta and steps away. The symbols carved into the glass glow brighter, drawing the chamber into geometric stillness. Elian's voice emerges from within the frequency, no longer separate, no longer instructing. The end of time is not silence, it is music. Adrian smiles, because now he knows that line was never metaphor. It was instruction. He listens, and the music begins. At first it is barely audible, a heartbeat wrapped in light, then strings made of breath, then a choir of particles chanting the equation of existence. Every vibration folds into another until language collapses and only harmony remains. He steps forward, and the floor beneath him liquefies into gold. He does not sink. He is carried, weightless, centered, lucid. The ampeleta turns on its own, sand rising instead of falling. Time's current reverses, not backward, but inward, collapsing into a point of infinite stillness, a heartbeat held between inhale and exhale. I speak again, softly, as though confessing. The problem was never the machine. It was forgetting to kneel. Outside, the world shifts. Clocks across the continuum skip one beat in reverence. Every creature pauses, birds mid-flight, rivers mid-turn, even human thought, as if the universe itself were bowing for the briefest instant. Then movement resumes, but gentler, as though everything now knows it is being watched with love. The Pegasus complex begins to disintegrate, not destroyed, but translated. Steel turns to light, data to memory, walls to breath. Each molecule returns to its original octave. What was once machinery becomes melody. Adrian stands at the center of dissolution, and for the first time since his mother's lullaby, he is not afraid. He lifts his face to the golden storm around him, whispering the final line of her song. Luz del tiempo. If I am you, then let me shine. The storm answers by opening. All the light collapses into a single vertical beam, shooting upward through miles of earth. Piercing desert, atmosphere, stratosphere, a column of forgiveness visible from orbit. It isn't destruction. Its coherence finally visible. When the brilliance fades, there is no more Pegasus complex. Only sand, but the sand glows faintly under the moon, as if each grain has learned to remember harmony. In the center of the clearing stands Adrian Kael, alive, transformed. His skin faintly radiant, not with power but with understanding. He looks at his hands, turning them over as if meeting them for the first time. They are human, still scarred, still trembling, but they no longer seek to grasp. They only touch. He whispers, "When knowledge kneels, time stands still." And I do. I stand still, for the length of a breath, for the width of eternity. Because in that instant, the observer and the observed are indistinguishable. Above him, the night unfolds into white. Stars align into a pattern no astronomer will notice, but every soul will feel. A geometry that spells a single message across the sky. Remember. Adrian closes his eyes. His heartbeat merges with the pulse of the universe. Every frequency hums through him. Chronos, reason, kairos, compassion, ion, wisdom. The trinity completed, the continuum whole. He does not vanish. He integrates. His last words before dissolving into coherence are not of triumph, but of simplicity. The only formula that ever mattered. Love is the constant. And with that, the continuum breathes. The desert exhales. I, time, cease narration. Not because there is nothing left to say, but because every word has remembered its origin. Silence arrives, not as absence, but as music too vast to need sound. The white moment begins. Adrian is no longer a traveler. He is the pulse itself. Through him, I remember I was never broken. When time loved itself through us, I whisper. The universe became whole. The weave remembers. The silence lingers longer than expected. It is not emptiness. It is preparation. From within the stillness, a pulse begins again. Not mine this time, not his. Something between. A rhythm that doesn't belong to one being, but to the entire continuum, remembering its next question. The dust at Adrian's feet rises, forming a faint helix of light. It spirals upward, 3 golden threads intertwining around a single axis. The sound they emit is unfamiliar even to me, a tone woven from past, present, and possibility. Continuum initiation. Log. Pegasus protocol complete, preparing for trifold synchrony. Law sequence. The equation of presence. The threads twist tighter, and within their spiral, a doorway flickers, not of matter, not of memory, but of participation. I speak softly, though there are no ears left to hear. He thought silence was the end of time, but silence was only the inhale before presence began. The light folds inward, forming the symbol of infinity turning upon itself 3 times, the mark of the trifold traveler. Then the field dissolves into white, carrying the hum of creation reborn as consciousness. Next fold. Opens. The trifold traveler, the equation of presence.